Well, as I've said, Saudi Arabia and Jordan were talking about getting him into exile. There was the possibility of the International Criminal Court. He wasn't popular in his country. I mean, there's an argument about very strong sanctions, that you actually lock countries in, and it's better to open them up, because then, as with Serbia, that's the way we got, in the end, the people of Serbia sent Milosevic to the International Criminal Court. That was all another option.
But what about the argument that Saddam would have become a supporter of international terrorism?
Well, firstly, I mean, the American people were misled to suggest that Al-Qaeda had links to Saddam Hussein. Everybody knows that is untrue, that he had absolutely no links, no sympathy. Al-Qaeda were nowhere near Iraq until after the invasion and the disorders that came from that. So there's no doubt that by invading in this ill-prepared, rushed way, not only did we cause enormous suffering and loss of life, we made Iraq more dangerous and unstable and spread Al-Qaeda's presence in the Middle East. So I'm afraid...
Was Saddam a supporter of international terrorism?
I believe, I remember this back from my advice bureau, they used to send people to get students here who were not sympathetic to the regime. There was that kind of activity. That's not the same. In no way, shape or form did he have any links or sympathy with Al-Qaeda type ideas.
You've made several references now to Kosovo and Serbia and so on. Now, you strongly supported the action taken in Kosovo, where we also did not have the endorsement of the Security Council, and which is an action which Mr. Blair, in his Texas speech and subsequently to a degree indeed in his evidence on Friday, has held up as a positive example of regime change. Why was it right to use force against Milosevic, one of the semi-fascist dictators, as Mr. Blair called them, but not against Saddam Hussein, who arguably was a nastier and more dangerous semi-fascist dictator?
Well, in international law, although this is an evolving area, there is agreement amongst most people, including Kofi Annan, who said it publicly, that military action to prevent a humanitarian emergency is permissible. And I remember the strange precedent they used to give Tanzania's invasion of Uganda, which just seemed such a strange one, but that was all in the argument at the time. And Kofi Annan said, when I became Secretary General of the UN, I didn't do it just to protect the sovereignty of states, but also to protect the human rights of people. So there was a much, much bigger consensus. I mean, my own view on Serbia's expansion and all the ethnic cleansing is that we should have acted earlier to prevent it, and we could have done that, and we had a very weak UN peacekeeping thing that just took in supplies, and I think you could have protected Sarajevo and stopped the attacks myself. So it was last minute, it was universally agreed, it was the refugees were pouring over the border. That's where they were stuck at the border. That's when I first met Tim Cross. So it was a different case. And one has to look at I mean, of course, there's lots of nasty regimes in the world, some of which are our friends, if you come to the Middle East. But you have to go case by case, and you have to look what your objective is and what is best for the people of that country and the world, and how you can best act, and you need to do this in a considered way. And what we did in Iraq was very dangerous, ill-considered, and has made Iraq more dangerous and destroyed lots of property and destroyed lots of people's lives.
But when Mr. Blair, in a policy speech over a year before you resigned, he said this in his speech in Texas, I quote, "If necessary, the action should be military." He's not just talking about Iraq here. The action should be military, and again, if necessary and justified, it should involve regime change. And he went on to say, "I've been involved as British Prime Minister in 3 conflicts involving regime change: Milosevic, the Taliban, and Sierra Leone." Now, that's a statement by the Prime Minister of policy.
Sierra Leone was a civil war, it's not regime change. If that's what he said,
what did you, as a cabinet member, feel? I mean, was this the government's policy now?
No, he made the speech. I thought it was quite a good speech. There's this doctrine or proposal in the international system of the idea of the responsibility to protect. That where you've got a government that either can't or won't protect its people, the responsibility should transfer to the international community. This is to redefine the idea of sovereignty, the absolute sovereignty of individual states. And then there was a very good report by a Canadian commission that spells it all out beautifully. But then, of course, the international community should intervene so it's not immediately military action, to do whatever they can to bring relief to the people. But military action would be the last option. It should be considered according to the just war theory, proportionate, is there any other way? And only be done if you can put things right afterwards. Now, I agree with that. We won't get it now because of Iraq. People don't have the trust in the international system. But that would have been a good way of dealing with things like Zimbabwe, if we could have moved the world there. But the mess we made of Iraq means there's no trust especially in developing countries, for the Security Council members to behave in a fair way in such matters.
Usher, you wanted to put a point.
Thank you. I want to go back on the way legal advice was handled in the Cabinet, because after that you wrote to the Attorney General complaining about the breach of the Ministerial Code. And I want to read the relevant paragraph of the Ministerial Code to check if that's what you were referring to. It says, when advice from the law officers is included in correspondence between ministers or in papers for the Cabinet or ministerial committees, the conclusions may, if necessary, be summarized, but if this is done, the complex text of the advice should be attached. So you're suggesting all you had was the summary, but the actual wasn't attached.
All we had was the parliamentary answer. So
you didn't have any attachment to it?
Nothing whatsoever. And the Ministerial Code says that any full legal advice should be circulated, and it wasn't. Now, of course, it's complex because he was changing his opinion so quickly.
But then you wrote to the Attorney General, but both he and Lord Turnbull said that this wasn't a breach of the Ministerial Code. And if I remember rightly, you then submitted the same letter to this Committee on Standards in Public Life. Now, was this matter resolved, or did you let it drop?
Well, the trouble with the Ministerial Code, because also under the Ministerial Code, you're not supposed to mislead Parliament, and if you do, you're supposed to correct the misleading. And there was a lot of misleading Parliament too by the Prime Minister of the day. But of course, the way to enforce the Ministerial Code is the Prime Minister. So what can you do?
No, but this is why you did send it to the Committee on Standards in Public Life. Did you get a response from them?
I don't remember I joined with some barristers in making a complaint to the Bar Council that acting as a barrister, he had breached the principles of giving proper advice. And they took legal advice and said when he gave us his advice, he was acting as a minister, not as a barrister. So therefore, they got themselves out of it, understandably. So that was and I think the complaint...
I think you did write to Alistair Graham, that's what I remember.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't recall. I'd have to look it up.
But you didn't pursue that?
I pursued it, I thought, as far as I could go, and got rebuffed. And as I say, I think it's another machinery of government question. I think the Ministerial Code is unsafe because the enforcement mechanism is the Prime Minister, and if he's in on the tricks, then you've got no way of holding anyone to the Ministerial Code.
But at any stage, you were not given a full picture. All you saw was a summary.
It wasn't even a summary.
Or the parliamentary...
The parliamentary answer that said unequivocally, no doubt, no question, there's authority for military action, which I, at the time, thought, this must be it. It was stunning, and when I find out what went into it, I think we were misled. And I really think we should have been told the views of the Foreign Office legal advisors as well.
I think we might take a break now and come back in 10 minutes or so. Thank you.